The stagecoach didn't just stop in Redemption Springs, it vomited. First, a battered leather trunk tumbling from the roof to land in the scorching New Mexico dirt. Then a woman. She was pushed out after it, a slender figure in a torn dress, collapsing without a sound. Nobody on the street paid much mind. Not at first. Arrivals like this weren't exactly uncommon in the summer of 1876, but from the porch of the general store, Nathan Harding saw it all. His hand, weathered and calloused, drifted to the revolver at his hip. It was an old habit, a reflex from a life that had taught him to expect trouble. He watched the stagecoach driver toss a small bag after the woman, crack his whip, and rumble on toward Santa Fe, leaving a cloud of dust and a broken life in his wake. Damn it all, Nathan muttered. He strode across the street, his boots kicking up puffs of dirt. As he got closer, he saw her trying to rise. Her arms trembled, her wrists were raw and purple. A deep cut marred her lip. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she fell back into the dust. He knelt beside her, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low gravel. She flinched, her eyes wide with a terror that went deeper than her injuries. She tried to shield her face, as if expecting another blow. "I ain't going to hurt you," he said, his voice softer this time. He didn't wait for an answer. He slid one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulders. He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. She was a bundle of broken bones and fear. As he cradled her against his chest, her breath hitched. He looked down into eyes the color of a stormy sky. And he made a promise, to her and to himself. "No one will hurt you again." He carried her toward Doc Sullivan's office, and with every step, he felt like he was carrying something far more dangerous than a helpless woman. He was carrying a secret. He just didn't know it yet. Her name was Rebecca Porter. She knew this because she'd read it on the manifest before her world had fallen apart. Now, in the arms of a stranger, she felt her name was all she had left. The world was a blur of pain, broken ribs, a head that felt like it was splitting open, and the shame. The shame was the worst part. "I can walk," she whispered. But it was a lie, and they both knew it. "Sure you can," the stranger Nathan replied. "But humor me." She had come west from Philadelphia to teach. A new life, a new start. Her fiancé, Charles, had promised to protect her. He had promised adventure. He had lied. His charm had curdled into rage 2 days into the journey. He had gambled away their money, and when she'd questioned him, he had answered with his fists. "Almost there," Nathan said. He kicked open the door to a small office that smelled of whiskey and carbolic acid. An older man with kind eyes looked up. "Good Lord, Nate, what have you brought me now?" "Found her outside the trading post. Stagecoach just dumped her." Nathan lowered her onto an examination table. The room spun. "I'm fine," she protested, but her voice was a faint whisper. "She needs looking after, Doc," Nathan said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'll cover the cost." "I can pay my own way," Rebecca insisted, though she knew the few coins in her reticule wouldn't even cover a meal. Charles had taken everything. The doctor's examination was quick and gentle. 3 broken ribs, bruising, concussion, dehydration, he announced. He looked at her, his kind eyes filled with a weary sadness. "Who did this to you, miss?" She couldn't bring herself to answer. She just looked away. "It matters to me," Nathan said. His voice was quiet, but it was as hard as the mountains that ringed the valley. She finally looked at him. Really looked at him, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of rich earth. He was a man made of hard lines and quiet strength. "My former fiancé," she finally admitted. "He's on his way to California. With my money." Nathan's face darkened. "Got a name?" "Nathan," the doctor warned. "Let the law handle it." "What law?" Nathan scoffed. "The law ain't been through these parts in months." The doctor finished binding her ribs. "She needs rest, but she can't stay here. My wife's sister is coming." "The boarding house is full," Nathan said. "She can stay at my place. I've got a spare room." Rebecca stiffened. A woman alone, in a man's house. The impropriety was unthinkable. "I'll be in the bunkhouse with my hands," Nathan added quickly, understanding her hesitation. "The house will be yours." She was trapped. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The stranger's offer was her only lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered, exhaustion finally overwhelming her pride. "Nathan owns the largest ranch in the territory," the doctor said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Half the town works for him." "Sullivan," Nathan warned. The doctor just shrugged. "Just providing context." An hour later, propped on pillows in Nathan's wagon, Rebecca felt the world begin to steady. As they crested a ridge, she gasped. Below them, a sprawling ranch house stood nestled in a green valley, a stream winding through it like a silver ribbon. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Built most of it myself," Nathan said, a quiet pride in his voice. "Started with nothing but a claim and a handful of cattle." He guided the wagon toward the main house. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable. Curtains at the windows, books on the shelves. A piano stood in the corner. "My mother's," Nathan explained, seeing her gaze. "She used to play." That night, lying in a clean, quiet room, Rebecca listened to the sounds of the ranch, the distant laughter of the ranch hands, the lowing of cattle. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. She felt safe. But safety in this land was a fragile thing, and as she drifted off to sleep, she clutched the small locked music box she kept in her bag. The one thing Charles hadn't taken, the one thing he was truly after, the one thing that could get them all killed. The next morning brought Mrs. Fenton, Nathan's housekeeper. She was a widow in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She arrived with fresh bread and a mission to restore Rebecca to health. "Too thin by half," she declared, setting a tray by the bed. "Mr. Harding says you're to eat every bite." "Mr. Harding seems to have strong opinions," Rebecca observed. Mrs. Fenton's face softened. "He's a good man. Lost his wife and baby 5 years back? Childbed fever?" She paused. "It changed him, made him watchful." The word sent a shiver down Rebecca's spine. Watchful. It was the perfect word for Nathan Harding. Over the next week, as her body began to heal, Rebecca saw what Mrs. Fenton meant. Nathan kept his distance, but she could feel his eyes on her. When she sat on the veranda, she'd see him on the ridge, watching the road. When she walked in the small garden, she'd catch a glimpse of him near the barn, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He wasn't watching her. He was watching for trouble. One afternoon, Mrs. Fenton was helping Rebecca unpack her trunk. The housekeeper's hands were efficient, folding dresses, arranging toiletries. Then she picked up the small, ornate music box. "This is lovely," she said, examining the intricate silver inlay. "Does it play?" "The key is lost," Rebecca said quickly, taking the box from her and placing it on the bedside table. Mrs. Fenton said nothing, but her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She had seen the way Rebecca's hand trembled. She had seen the flicker of fear in her eyes. Later that day, she found Nathan by the corral. "That woman is hiding something, sir," she said, her voice low. "Something more than a bad fiancé." Nathan just nodded, his face unreadable. "I know," he said, and he left it at that. On the 8th day, the silence of the house became too much for Rebecca. Her ribs still ached, but the need for music was stronger than the pain. She sat at the piano, her fingers tracing the dusty keys. She began to play, a sad, haunting melody from Chopin. She was so lost in the music she didn't hear him enter the room. When she finished, she found him standing in the doorway, his hat in his hand, his face a mask of profound sorrow. "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard in 5 years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Since my wife—" He didn't finish the sentence. He moved into the room and sat in a worn leather chair. "Play more," he said. She played for an hour. Classical pieces, folk songs, hymns. When she stopped, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You should be the teacher here," he said abruptly. "Redemption Springs needs a teacher. The schoolhouse is built. It's just sitting empty." The idea was a shock, but it was also a lifeline, a purpose, a way to stand on her own 2 feet. "I'd need a place to live," she said. "The town provides a small house for the teacher," he replied. He hesitated for a moment. "Or you could stay here." "That wouldn't be proper," Rebecca said quickly, a blush rising to her cheeks. Nathan looked away, a flicker of something she couldn't name in his eyes. Disappointment? Or maybe relief. "No," he said. I suppose not. He drove her into town the next day. The schoolhouse was small but clean. The house next to it was tidy and welcoming. The town council hired her on the spot. Her new life was beginning. But as Nathan left her there with a promise to bring her things the next day, Rebecca felt an unexpected pang of loss. The safety of his ranch, of his watchful eyes, was gone. She was on her own again. She was arranging books on the shelves 2 days before school was to begin when the door burst open. It was Charles. He was drunk, unshaven, his eyes wild with a greedy fire. "There you are," he slurred, lunging for her. "Thought you could hide from me." He grabbed her arm, twisting it. "You're coming with me. You have something that belongs to me." "Let go of me!" she cried, struggling against him. He backhanded her across the face. She fell, sprawling against the desks, the taste of blood in her mouth. "You still haven't learned," he snarled, dragging her back by her ankle. "No one refuses Charles Winters." The schoolhouse door didn't just open. It exploded inward, ripped from its hinges. Nathan Harding stood there, his face a mask of cold, terrifying fury. He moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. He lifted Charles from the floor by his throat, slamming him against the wall. "You touch her again," Nathan said, his voice a low, deadly calm, "and you're a dead man." Charles clawed at Nathan's hand, his face turning purple. "She's my fiancée," he choked out. "Former fiancé," Rebecca corrected, getting to her feet, her body trembling. "And he's not here for me. He's here for this." She walked to her carpet bag and pulled out the small music box. "This is what he wants. This is why he beat me. Why he left me for dead." Nathan's grip tightened. He looked from the box to Charles's terrified face. "What is it?" "It's nothing," Charles gasped. "Just a family heirloom." Nathan didn't believe him. He dragged Charles outside and threw him into the street. "You have 1 hour to be gone from this town," he said. "If I ever see your face again, I will kill you." Charles scrambled to his feet, his bravado returning. "You'll regret this," he spat, reaching for the gun at his hip. He never cleared the leather. Nathan's draw was a blur of motion. The shot cracked through the quiet afternoon. Charles crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder, his face a mask of shock and pain. Doc Sullivan came running. As he patched up Charles, Nathan turned to Rebecca. He gently touched her cheek where Charles had struck her. His eyes were troubled. "I should have killed him." "No," Rebecca said. "You're not a killer." "I've killed before," Nathan admitted, his voice low. "Protecting what's mine." He looked at her, and his gaze was so intense it felt like a physical touch. "Is this different?" She placed her hand over his. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping your promise." He looked confused. "What promise?" "The day we met," she reminded him. "You said no one would hurt me again." Something shifted in his face then. A wall came down. "I meant it," he said. "I still do." That evening, Nathan came to her small house. He sat with her on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire. "I have to ask," he said finally. "What's in that music box?" Rebecca hesitated. Then she looked at the man who had saved her, the man who had shown her nothing but kindness, and she knew she owed him the truth. "It's not what's in it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's what it is. It's a key." Nathan looked at her, his brow furrowed. "A key to what?" "A key to a bank box in Santa Fe," she explained. "It belonged to my father. He was a geologist. He was partners with a very powerful, very dangerous man. My father discovered something of immense value. He documented it, put the proof in that box, and had this key made. It's the only one." "And your fiancé?" Nathan asked. "Charles was never my fiancé," she said, the shame of it all washing over her again. "He worked for my father's partner. He was supposed to marry me to get the key. When my father died suddenly, and I refused to give it to him, he tried to take it by force." A heavy silence settled between them. The last light faded from the sky. "What's the name of this dangerous man?" Nathan asked, his voice strangely tight. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "His name is Silas Kane." The name hit Nathan like a physical blow. He stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the porch. He stared at her, his face pale in the twilight. Silas Kane, the man who had started the range war that nearly destroyed him, the man who had bought up all the land around his ranch, trying to squeeze him out, the man who had murdered his wife. The world tilted on its axis. Rebecca wasn't just a random woman the stagecoach had dumped in his path. She was a piece of a puzzle he had been trying to solve for 5 years. She was a message from the past. The key she carried wasn't just the key to her father's discovery, it was the key to his wife's murder. And now he understood. The trouble hadn't followed Rebecca to Redemption Springs. It had been waiting for her all along. Nathan stared at Rebecca, the pieces of his past and her present slamming together with the force of a locomotive. His wife, Sarah, hadn't just died of a fever after their baby was born. That was the story he told, the story he had to believe to keep from going mad. The truth was darker. Sarah's family had owned the land to the east of his. Rich, fertile land that Silas Kane wanted. When they refused to sell, Kane started a range war. He hired rustlers, poisoned wells, burned barns. It was a slow, brutal siege. Sarah's father and brothers were killed in a so-called stampede that Nathan knew was no accident. Sarah had been broken by it. A month after their son was born, she rode out to meet with Cain, convinced she could reason with him, convince him to leave them in peace. She never came back. Nathan found her at the bottom of a ravine. Her horse shot out from under her. The sheriff had called it a tragic riding accident. Nathan knew it was murder, but he had no proof. Cain was too powerful, too well connected. So Nathan had retreated into his grief, into his work, building his ranch into a fortress, waiting for a chance at revenge that he knew would probably never come, until now. My wife, he began, his voice rough. She was trying to protect something, deeds to her family's land. She hid them before she died. I never found them. Rebecca's eyes widened. My father's discovery. It wasn't gold. It was water. A massive underground aquifer, enough to turn this entire valley green. The deeds in that bank box, they're not just for mineral rights. They're for the water rights to this whole territory, including the land that belonged to your wife's family. Now it all made sense. Cain hadn't just wanted the land. He wanted the water beneath it. He had killed Sarah's family, and then Sarah to get it. Rebecca's father must have surveyed the land for Cain, discovered the aquifer, and then tried to double-cross him, hiding the proof in the bank box. And Rebecca, holding the only key, was the last obstacle between Cain and a fortune that would make him the most powerful man in the territory. He knows you're here, Nathan said, his voice grim. Charles was his scout. Now that he's failed, Cain will come himself. They were no longer a rancher and a schoolteacher. They were two soldiers in a war that had started long before they'd ever met. They were two survivors, bound together by a common enemy. The next 3 days were a blur of tense preparation. Nathan rode out, his face set in hard lines, checking his fences, his livestock, his ammunition. He sent 2 of his most trusted ranch hands to watch the main road, to give them warning. Rebecca, in the small schoolhouse, felt like she was living in a dream. She taught her students their letters, their numbers, but her mind was elsewhere. Every shadow, every gust of wind, felt like a threat. On the 3rd day, as she was dismissing her students for the afternoon, she saw a rider approaching. It wasn't one of Nathan's men. This man was dressed in a fine city suit, his horse a sleek black thoroughbred. He dismounted in front of the schoolhouse, his movements smooth and confident. It was Silas Kane. He was older than she'd expected, with silver hair and a smile that was all charm and no warmth. Miss Porter, he said, his voice like honeyed poison. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away toward the schoolhouse door. There's no need for unpleasantness, Kane said, taking a step toward her. I'm a reasonable man. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer for that music box. It's not for sale, she said, her voice trembling. Kane's smile faded. Everything is for sale, my dear. It's just a matter of finding the right price. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. Perhaps this will convince you? He tossed the pouch onto the ground. It landed with a soft, sickening thud. Rebecca stared at it, her blood running cold. It wasn't a bag of coins. It was Mrs. Fenton's embroidered apron, stained dark with blood. The old woman was Uncooperative, Kane said, his voice casual. I'm hoping you'll be more sensible. The key, now, or my men, who are currently enjoying the hospitality of Mr. Harding's ranch, will start with the children. Rebecca's world shattered. He had Mrs. Fenton. He had the ranch. And now he was threatening her students. She looked past him and saw them. Two more of Kane's men, holding a half dozen of her students, their small faces pale with terror. She was trapped. She had no choice. With tears streaming down her face, she ran back into the schoolhouse, grabbed the music box, and handed it to Silas Kane. He took it, his eyes gleaming with triumph. A wise decision, he said. He turned to leave, his men releasing the children, who ran sobbing to their homes. But as he mounted his horse, he paused. He looked back at Rebecca, a cruel, calculating look in his eyes. You know, he said, I don't like loose ends. He drew his pistol. But before he could fire, a shot rang out from the ridge above the town. Kane cried out, clutching his arm, the music box falling from his grasp. Nathan Harding stood on the ridge, his rifle smoking in his hands. He wasn't alone. Behind him were a dozen of his ranch hands, all armed, all ready for a fight. He had seen Kane's men ride in. He had known it was a trap. Kane spurred his horse, galloping out of town, his men close behind, leaving the music box lying in the dirt. Nathan raced down the ridge, his face a mask of fury and fear. He ran to Rebecca, grabbing her by the shoulders. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? I'm fine, she sobbed, collapsing into his arms. But Mrs. Fenton. He has Mrs. Fenton. Nathan's jaw tightened. I know, we're going to get her back. He picked up the music box. The key, the proof. It was all right here, but it was useless without the woman who had brought it to him. He looked from the key in his hand to the dust cloud of Kane's retreating riders. This wasn't about land or water anymore. It was about a promise. And Nathan Harding always kept his promises. The town of Redemption Springs, which had once been a place of whispers and judgment, was transformed. Fear was a powerful motivator. When the townsfolk learned that Silas Kane had threatened their children, they rallied behind Nathan Harding. Men who had only ever lifted a shovel or a hammer now picked up rifles. Nathan's plan was simple and brutal. Kane had retreated to the old abandoned silver mine in the hills, a place of treacherous tunnels and dark history. It was a natural fortress, but Nathan knew those hills better than anyone. He had grown up exploring them. He divided his men into 3 groups. One would create a diversion at the main entrance to the mine. The second, led by Nathan himself, would use a forgotten side tunnel to enter the mine from behind. The third, a group of the town's best trackers, would circle the perimeter, ensuring no one escaped. Rebecca refused to be left behind. I know him, she argued. I know how he thinks. He'll expect a direct assault. He won't expect me. She pulled a small derringer from her reticule. My father taught me how to use this. I'm not a victim anymore, Nathan. He saw the fire in her eyes, the hard-won strength, and he knew he couldn't stop her. He also knew she was right. They moved under the cover of darkness, the moon hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. The diversion worked perfectly. As shots echoed from the main entrance, Nathan led his small group, including Rebecca, into the dark, narrow side tunnel. The air inside was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the drip of water and the scuttling of unseen things. They moved slowly, their lanterns casting long, dancing shadows. They found Mrs. Fenton in a small side chamber, tied to a wooden support beam. She was bruised and terrified, but alive. One of Nathan's men untied her and led her back toward the entrance. Kane's in the main chamber, Mrs. Fenton whispered as she passed them. He's got the deeds out. He's gloating. They pressed on, deeper into the mine. As they neared the main chamber, they could hear Kane's voice, arrogant and triumphant. And with the water rights secured, the railroad will have no choice but to deal with me. I'll own this whole territory within a year. Nathan motioned for his men to take up positions. He and Rebecca crept to the edge of the chamber, peering around a massive rock formation. Silas Kane stood by a makeshift table, the deeds from the bank box spread out before him. The music box sat beside them. 2 of his guards stood nearby. It's a shame about the girl's father, Kane was saying to one of his men. He was a brilliant geologist, but he got greedy. He thought he could outsmart me. That's when Rebecca stepped out from behind the rock. He wasn't the greedy one, Silas, she said. her voice ringing through the cavern. Cain spun around, his face a mask of shock. You! He snarled. It's over, Nathan said, stepping out beside her, his rifle leveled at Cain's chest. My men have the mine surrounded. You have nowhere to go. Cain's eyes darted around the chamber, seeing the truth in Nathan's words, but he wasn't a man who surrendered. He made a desperate move, grabbing the music box and holding it up. This is the real prize, he shouted. Without this, those deeds are just worthless paper. He was bluffing, trying to create a distraction. But it was a fatal mistake. As he held up the box, he exposed his chest for a split second. Nathan fired. The shot echoed through the mine like a clap of thunder. Cain staggered back, a look of stunned surprise on his face. He looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, then at Nathan. You! He gasped. And then he fell, the deeds scattering across the dusty floor. His two guards, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons and surrendered. It was over. They walked out of the mine into the pale light of dawn. The town was waiting. They cheered as Nathan and Rebecca emerged, victorious. In the days that followed, the truth came out. The deeds in the bank box were the proof Nathan needed. They showed Cain's systematic, illegal acquisition of land, his fraudulent claims, his conspiracy. With Cain dead, his empire crumbled. The land and the water rights were returned to their rightful owners. The Double H Ranch, now with its water rights secured, prospered more than ever. The town of Redemption Springs, free from the shadow of Silas Cain, flourished. A year later, on a warm spring afternoon, Nathan and Rebecca were married in the small schoolhouse, surrounded by her students and the entire town. After the ceremony, they stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset. Rebecca's music, published by a firm in San Francisco that Nathan had contacted, was becoming known throughout the territories. Their future, once so uncertain, now stretched before them, as wide and as promising as the western sky. Nathan took her hand. I made you a promise once, he said, his voice soft, that no one would hurt you again. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And I made a promise to myself, she replied, that I would learn to be strong enough to protect myself. She smiled. It seems we both kept our promises. He drew her close. Their story had begun with violence and despair, a woman left for dead in the dust. But it had ended here, in a place of healing, of justice, and of a love that was as strong and as enduring as the land itself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of courage and redemption from the American West.